Hello guys, welcome. I hope you're doing well tonight. Close your eyes and imagine, just for a moment, that we're going on a gentle journey. Far back in time, we're traveling to the world of the Aztec Empire, to the Valley of Mexico, more than 5 centuries ago. Tonight, I'll be your quiet guide, offering you a calm and honest look at what daily life really looked like back then, especially through the lens of food, what people actually ate in ancient Mexico. There will be no interruptions, no sudden noises, just a soft and soothing exploration of the past to help you relax, unwind, and maybe even drift peacefully off to sleep. If you find yourself enjoying this slow journey through history, feel free to softly support it, perhaps with a little like or by joining our quiet community as a subscriber. And if you'd like, you're warmly invited to leave a gentle comment below. What time is it where you are right now? And where in the world are you watching from? It's always a joy to see how far and wide this peaceful moment reaches. For now, simply get cozy, breathe gently, and let's begin this story. Imagine it is early morning in late 1470. The stars are fading over the lakes and temples of Tenochtitlan, the great Aztec capital. The city is still mostly asleep. In a humble wooden and adobe home on the outskirts, a dim orange glow flickers. A small fire has been kindled in the pre-dawn darkness. In its light, you can make out a woman's figure kneeling on the earthen floor. She is an ordinary Aztec commoner, a farmer's wife, and she has risen long before sunrise. Every day begins this way for her. By touch and memory, she feeds dry maize kernels into a stone grinder called a metate. Scritchy scritch. The only sounds are the quiet grinding of corn and the crackle of the hearth. She works slowly, rhythmically, pushing the handheld stone, the mano back and forth, crushing the softened corn into dough. The rest of her family still sleeps on woven mats behind her, and she moves with the gentle deliberation of someone performing a familiar, almost sacred morning ritual. The corn she is grinding was prepared the night before. She treated the kernels by soaking them in water with a bit of lime from wood ash, a practice her people have used for generations. This process, called nixtamalization by us today, softens the maize and unlocks its nutrients. To her, it's just the way one cooks corn, a gift from the gods that must be honored with proper care. The soaked corn has been rinsed and is now easier to grind. As she crushes the grains, a soft, moist mass of dough forms on the grinding stone. The scent of fresh ground corn rises subtly in the air, mixing with a hint of wood smoke. It is a comforting, nutty smell. In the dim light, she pauses to sprinkle a few drops of water onto the dough, then grinds again until the texture is just right, smooth, warm, and pliable under her hands. This quiet labor is the heartbeat of an Aztec home. Every morning, thousands of women across the land do exactly what she is doing now. It takes time, hours each day, and considerable effort. The woman's back and arms ache from years of this work, yet she performs it with practiced ease. By the time the sun rises, her knees will be covered in a fine dusting of corn flour, and her muscles warm from exertion. There is a slight sheen of sweat on her brow. This daily milling of maize is so essential that an Aztec saying claims it consumes thousands of hours of every woman's life. It is hard work, but it feeds the family. She knows that each tortilla she will shape from this dough carries the weight of her care and the sustenance of her loved ones. In this world, every single bite of food is earned through someone's steady labor, planting, tending, grinding, fetching, and she feels the significance of that as she prepares the day's first meal. Outside, the sky is beginning to lighten to a deep blue. The woman's eldest daughter stirs from sleep. This young girl, perhaps 12 years old, has known since she was little that one day she will take on the same morning duty. For now, she quietly joins her mother by the hearth to help. The two work in silence, listening to the small sounds of dawn, a rooster crowing faintly in a distant Chinampa field, the soft splash of a canoe pole in the canal outside as a fisherman sets out early, and the gentle grinding of corn under stone. It's a peaceful time of day, almost meditative. The daughter crouches and blows gently on the embers to stoke the fire, just as she has been taught. Sparks flutter up, illuminating her face for a moment. Her mother has finished grinding. She gathers the soft masa into a bowl and adds a bit of water, kneading it with skilled hands. Now it's time to make tortillas. The girl smiles sleepily and begins to help pat out the tortillas. She takes a small lump of dough and claps it between her palms in a steady pat, pat, pat rhythm. Her mother does the same. Together they flatten the dough into thin, round cakes. In this quiet pre-dawn hour, that gentle patting sound echoes in countless homes, a comforting sign that breakfast will soon be ready. Even today, in rural Mexican villages, people say that the soft patting of hands shaping corn masa is one of the most soothing morning sounds. In our imagination, over the misty lake waters of ancient Tenochtitlan, you might almost hear that faint refrain of pat, 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 as hundreds of women start their day in unison, turning corn dough into life-giving bread. The clay griddle, called a comal, is heating over the fire now. The mother carefully lays a raw tortilla on the hot surface. It sizzles very softly. A whiff of steam rises, carrying the toasty aroma of corn. After a moment, she flips it, using just her fingertips, quickly so as not to burn herself. There are no metal spatulas here, no modern utensils at all. She uses her hands deftly, the way her ancestors did. Aztec cooking relies on simple tools made of clay, wood, and stone. A flat clay comal for baking tortillas, clay pots for boiling stews, gourds for bowls, a few wooden stirring sticks. That is the extent of her kitchenware. There are no forks or spoons for eating either. Food is picked up with the fingers, or scooped with pieces of tortilla, or sipped from bowls. Meals are served on ceramic plates or leaves, and everyone sits on mats on the floor to eat. It's a world without chairs or dining tables, without silverware clattering. A simpler, quieter world where people eat close to the earth, with their hands in humble dishes. As the first tortillas puff up with a delicate blistered brown spot here and there, the smell draws the rest of the family from their sleep. The man of the house, the father, had risen before dawn too, but he went out briefly to tend to something, maybe to check on their canoe moored by the canal, or to see that the ducks and turkeys they keep are safe in their pen. He returns now, the door curtain rustling, carrying a jug of fresh water that he collected from a nearby public well or cistern. Clean water is precious here. The Great Lake Texcoco that surrounds the city is brackish and salty, not good for drinking. In Tenochtitlan, aqueducts built by the rulers bring in fresh spring water from the hills, but for those on the edges of the city, water still needs to be fetched each day from designated points. The father sets down the clay jug carefully. The water inside sloshes. It's cool and clear, gathered before any dust of the day has disturbed it. In a moment, they'll mix some of this water with ground maize to make a warm drink. The children, a young boy of about 8 and a toddler girl, rub their eyes and sit up from their sleeping mats. The boy's stomach rumbles. He has been dreaming of the tortillas ever since the aroma reached his nose. But in Aztec custom, the family won't eat right away upon waking. Typically, they will do a bit of morning work first, and then have their first meal a little later in the morning. So the mother keeps the tortillas warm, wrapped in a cloth, and turns her attention to making atole. Atole is a kind of thin porridge or hot cereal made from maize. She scoops a portion of the masa dough into a pot of water and stirs, adding perhaps a touch of roasted ground cacao beans or a sprinkle of dried chili for flavor. Or if they are lucky and have a bit of honey, she might sweeten it instead. This will be their version of breakfast tea or coffee, a hearty, slightly thick drink, smooth and filling. In fact, atole provides a considerable part of the day's calories for many Aztecs. It is easy for young children to drink and for adults to take on the go. As the atole simmers gently, the family begins their day's tasks. The sun's first rays peek above the eastern mountains now, casting a pale golden light over the thatched rooftops. The air is still cool and carries the fragrance of damp earth and lingering smoke from many hearth fires. The father and son step outside to check their small garden plot behind the house. They grow some chilies and herbs there, maybe a squash vine creeping along the fence. The son shoos away a few hungry insects from the squash blossoms and proudly shows his father a pumpkin that has started to swell on the vine. The father nods approvingly and pats the boy's head. Each family here tries to cultivate a little something. Although space in the city is tight, even a tiny backyard can host a few bean plants or medicinal herbs. For the rest of their food, they rely on the larger fields outside the city and on the chinampas, the famous floating gardens in the lake. Our family is fortunate. They have access to chinampa plots inherited through the wife's kin. These chinampas are remarkable man-made islands of fertile soil, created by staking out rectangles in the shallow lake bed and heaping them with mud, sediment, and compost. Canals surround each plot so they look like ribbons of green field floating on water. These garden islands are incredibly productive, yielding multiple harvests a year of maize, beans, squash, tomatoes, chili peppers, and more. The Aztecs have developed these plots over generations, renewing them with rich lake mud each season, so that on a given chinampa, they might harvest up to 7 crops in a year. Not every year yields that much, of course, but even in an average year, the output is impressive. It's enough to feed the bustling capital city, which sits in the middle of the lake. From the distance, if you were an early traveler approaching by canoe at sunrise, you would see a patchwork of these green chinampas surrounding Tenochtitlan, like a great quilt of farmland on water. And as the sun rises, you'd see farmers paddling out in their narrow canoes to tend them, like silent shadows moving among the reeds. Back in our little household, the mother calls softly that the atoll is ready. The father and boy return, and the family gathers on their reed mat floor, sitting cross-legged. They don't have a formal table. Instead, they might have a wooden tray, or just a few pottery bowls set out. The mother ladles the warm atoll into small cups. It's steamy and smells of roasted corn, a comforting, slightly sweet smell if honey was added, or invigoratingly spicy if she used chili. She also brings out a few of the fresh tortillas, along with a small bowl of salsa, a simple sauce of chili peppers and tomatoes that she pounded in a stone mortar. Their first meal of the day is light. Each person sips the thick hot atoll and perhaps nibbles a tortilla or two, dipping it into the chili tomato sauce for flavor. The tortillas are soft and a bit chewy, with pleasant charred spots from the comal. As they tear off pieces, steam escapes from the flatbreads. The young boy pinches some coarse salt onto his tortilla. Salt and chili are always on the table in an Aztec meal, even a simple one. These are the 2 flavor essentials they cannot do without, to the point that true fasting in their culture means abstaining from salt and chili peppers entirely. But today is not a fast day. They have salt and chili in abundance, and the boy's eyes water a little as he takes a generous bite dipped in spicy salsa. It's a pleasant burn on the tongue, balanced by the bland warmth of the atoll he swallows after. They eat quietly, not speaking much at this hour. Perhaps they murmur a short prayer of thanks under their breath. Many Aztec families have a custom of dropping a small portion of food to the ground before eating, a way of sharing with the earth and the gods, acknowledging that the bounty ultimately comes from them. This morning, the father carefully breaks off a corner of his tortilla and sets it aside on a clean leaf as an offering to Tlaltecutli, the Earth Lord, or perhaps to the household's little clay figurine of the corn goddess. It's a humble gesture of gratitude. Only then do they begin to eat in earnest. After finishing their cups of atole, the adults and the boy feel energized. The toddler has dozed off again, full and warm in a blanket. Now it's time to truly start the workday. The sun is higher, casting a pearly light on the neighborhood. Over the rooftops, one can see the distant gleam of the great pyramid temples in the city center, but our family's mind is on the fields. The father and mother prepare to go tend their crops. They will take the canoe out to their chinampa plot. The chinampa isn't right next to their home. It might be a short paddle away through the canal network. The father gathers his farming tools, a koa, a sharp wooden digging stick, some woven baskets, and perhaps a net or two. The mother packs a bit of food for later. She wraps a few cold tortillas from last night's batch in leaves, along with a handful of beans and chili paste smeared inside for flavor, making impromptu tacos. She also brings along a tamale or two, if they have any left. Tamales are corn dough mixed with fillings and steamed in a husk, excellent as portable food. If they were prepared for the day, she might have cooked tamales in advance, but tamales are usually a treat for special occasions in a common home, so leftovers are rare. More often, she'll simply rely on cold tortillas for lunch. She tucks the food into a basket and also takes a gourd filled with fresh water. The son, eager to learn, accompanies his parents today. He carries a small bundle of tools and will try to help where he can. They untie the family canoe, a simple dugout canoe, from the post at the canal bank. The water in the canal is mirror still, reflecting the morning clouds. The father uses a long pole to push the canoe along, while the mother and boy sit in front. They glide quietly through a watery alleyway between other houses and gardens. Along the banks, other families are also heading out to work. A pair of brothers paddling towards the lake, with fishing nets piled in their canoe. An old woman on a raft carrying baskets of fresh vegetables, probably destined for the market, and a few children swimming and splashing before their chores begin. As our family reaches the open lake, the view opens up magnificently. To the east, the rising sun silhouettes the white peaks of two great volcanoes on the horizon. To the west, across glittering waters, the island city of Tenochtitlan rises, its temples and palaces just waking with activity. But the family turns south, navigating between reeds towards their plot. The chinampas spread out before them, narrow strips of green land separated by a lattice of canals. Each plot is lined with rows of willow trees at the edges. The trees' roots help stabilize the soil and also provide pleasant shade. The willow's leaves rustle in a mild breeze. The canal water laps gently against the canoe. This tranquil farmland on the lake itself is truly an oasis of plenty. The family's plot is producing maize. The corn plants are as tall as the father's chest right now, with long green leaves and the beginnings of ears showing silk. Among the corn stalks, they've interplanted beans that climb the corn and squash vines that sprawl underneath. This trio of crops, corn, beans, squash, is known to many native peoples as the Three Sisters because they thrive together. The corn provides a stalk for beans to climb. The beans fix nitrogen in the soil to nourish the corn, and the squash's broad leaves shade the ground to keep it moist. It's a beautiful system, and the Aztecs are masters of it. Today, the tasks might include weeding the rows, checking for pests, or if it's the right time of year, harvesting. Let's say it is midsummer in our scene, the growing season. The father hops off the canoe onto the spongy soil of the chinampa, steadying the boat for his wife and son. They step onto the land. Immediately the boy's sandals sink slightly into the damp earth, and he laughs, catching his balance, Dragonflies flit over the canal surface, and somewhere a duck quacks. The family ties the canoe to a stake. They will be here for several hours working. Under the already warm sun, they set to labor. The father uses the koa stick to break up some clods of earth and uproot weeds that threaten to strangle the crops. The mother and son carefully inspect the squash plants for worms or beetles, plucking off any they find. Every so often, she straightens up, hands on her back, stretching her spine. Farming is hard on the body. There are mosquitoes about, and the boy swats them absent-mindedly. By late morning, the sun climbs high and the heat intensifies. Here, at over 7,000 feet elevation in the Valley of Mexico, the sun's rays are strong. The family's foreheads glisten with sweat. It's time for a break. They retreat to the shade of a willow at the edge of the plot. The boy eagerly fetches the food basket from the canoe. The mother unwraps their simple midday fare. Each of them takes a cool tortilla, now a bit stiff but still satisfying. She had smeared them with a spicy bean paste earlier, essentially mashed beans mixed with chili. The Aztecs eat beans daily. Beans are a crucial source of protein and pair perfectly with maize, completing the amino acids needed for a healthy diet. As they munch on these bean tortillas, they also munch on some fresh squash slices that they picked right off the vine, crisp and green tasting. The father has a small pouch of roasted chili salt, a mix of salt and ground dried chili peppers, which he sprinkles on the squash to give it a kick. It's simple but delicious, the way a slice of cucumber with salt might be refreshing to us. They also share a few avocado slices. There is an avocado tree on a nearby chintampa, whose owner bartered some avocados with them for extra chilies last week. The soft, rich avocado flesh and the crunchy salted squash make a nice contrast. From the gourd jug, they pour water into clay cups and take long drinks. The water is lukewarm by now, but it quenches their thirst. On special days, they might have had something more exciting to drink, perhaps a cacao drink, chocolate if they were wealthy, or it was a festival, or a fermented pulque, the alcoholic maguey sap, if it were an occasion to celebrate. But for an ordinary workday lunch, fresh water is perfectly fine. Sometimes, for variety, the mother might flavor the water with a squeeze of maguey sap or a handful of crushed fruit, if available, making a sort of light agua fresca. Today, though, just water, cool and pure, a blessing in itself under the hot sun. They eat with contentment, resting their legs. The lake is shimmering around them. In the distance, other farmers are doing the same. You can see specks of people under trees, perhaps even hear faint laughter or conversation carrying over water. There is a sense of communal rhythm. Everyone rose early, worked through the morning, and now pauses at midday to refresh themselves with food and drink. The Aztecs generally have 2 main meals in a day. The first one we saw after some morning work, and the second one will come later, likely in the later afternoon or early evening when they return home. What they are having now by the chinampa is more of a snack or a light interim meal, just enough to keep their strength until they get home. In some cases, common folk did indeed only eat twice, a late morning meal and then a late afternoon meal. In other cases, they might nibble on simple snacks, to coetal between those meals. Snacks could be as simple as a handful of roasted maize kernels, like early popcorn or corn nuts, or toasted pumpkin seeds, or wild fruits gathered by children. Today the boy pulls out a surprise from the basket, a few toasted grasshoppers that he caught in the bean patch earlier. He grins and offers them to his parents. Yes, roasted grasshoppers, chapulines, are a treat, crunchy, nutty, and rich in protein. The father chuckles and pops one in his mouth, crunching it with satisfaction. In this world, no source of nourishment is wasted or considered too humble. Insects like grasshoppers or ant eggs, called Eskimos, are delicacies when in season. The mother declines this time. Perhaps she doesn't crave the grasshopper's taste at the moment, but she does bite into a small chili pepper raw, enjoying the sharp bite. After this brief respite, the family gets back to work. They know they must head to the city market later today, so they want to finish their farm chores by early afternoon. They gather whatever produce is ready to bring with them, perhaps a basket of fresh tomatoes and chili peppers, and some cactus pads, nopales that can be sold or traded. The Aztec diet includes a lot of fresh vegetables and greens beyond the big three crops. They might collect wild quellites, edible greens, along the edges of the chinampa, or some herbs like epazote for seasoning beans. If the maggie cacti growing on the drier parts have ripe fruits, called tunas, prickly pear fruits, they'll pick a few of those sweet red or green fruits as well. The variety of plant foods available is impressive. Besides maize, beans, squash, and chili, they enjoy things like tomatillos, onions and spring onions, amaranth leaves and seeds, sweet potatoes, and various native fruits like guava, papaya, and zapote when they can get them. Not all of those grow on their chinampa. Fruits like papaya and guava come from warmer southern regions via trade, but tomatoes, chilies, and amaranth do well here. By mid-afternoon, they load their canoe with their produce and head back to town. The sun is now blazing and the family is tired. It's around the hottest time of day, roughly the third hour after noon, perhaps about 3 o'clock, which is typically when the Aztecs plan to have their main meal of the day. The timing works out. They will stop by the market on their way home, then go eat and rest. The canoe is a bit heavier on the return, laden with goods. As they paddle closer to the city center, the quiet of the chinampas gives way to more activity. They pass other canoes heading to market, piled high with goods. One is full of flowers, brilliant marigolds and lilies grown for the temples and for decoration, another with ceramic pots crafted in a nearby village. A larger boat is rowed by a team of merchants, and on it are cages of turkeys and ducks, squawking and quacking as they're transported to be sold for meat. Yes, the Aztecs domesticated turkeys, huesolol, and a breed of small hairless dogs, itzcuintli for food, as well as ducks. These animals are considered delicacies, mostly destined for the tables of the wealthy or for special feasts. The common family doesn't often slaughter their own turkeys or dogs. Those are more valuable, alive for eggs, in the case of turkeys, or protection and companionship, dogs, unless a festival calls for it. So seeing these fat birds and plump dogs on the merchant's canoe reminds our family that there's a class of people in the city who will dine on meat more often than they do. Soon, they enter a broad canal that leads toward the marketplace of Tlatelolco, the biggest market in the Aztec world. The sounds of commerce carry over the water, a low buzzing murmur of countless conversations and shouts. They dock their canoe at a landing where many others are tied up. The mother and father unload their baskets of tomatoes, chilies, cactus pads, and herbs. The boy hops out and eagerly looks around, eyes shining at the bustling scene. The Tlatelolco market is truly a sight to behold. Under the bright afternoon sun, a huge open square is filled with thousands of people and a dizzying variety of goods laid out on reed mats or in stalls. Even the Spanish soldiers who will arrive in decades to come will be astonished at this market, noting that they had never seen such a thing before in terms of size and order. Today, for our family, it's just the normal place to get what they need and to trade their produce for other items. They find a spot at the produce section and lay out their wares on a mat. The mother is a skilled barterer. She knows what her tomatoes are worth today, especially those ripe red ones picked at peak flavor. Shoppers, mostly other commoners, but also a few servants of nobles with long baskets, come by and inspect the vegetables. A woman with a baby on her back squats down and picks up a chili, asking for the price. In the market, currency is a mix of barter and a few standard items used as money. Cacao beans are one such currency. Ironically, something the family rarely gets to consume as food, because the little precious beans are more valuable traded for other necessities. Small purchases might be priced in cacao beans. For example, a good tomato might cost 1 cacao bean each in the city market economy. Another form of currency is cotton cloth links, for bigger deals, but those are for high-value trades. For something like a handful of fresh nopal cactus pads, maybe a few cacao beans or a small measure of salt could be exchanged. Salt itself is an important commodity, often used as payment. They might measure it in bags or spoonfuls for trade. Our mother bargains kindly with the woman and ends up trading a dozen of her glossy green chilies for a small cake of lime, the kind used for treating corn, and a handful of quail eggs the woman has brought from her village. Trades like this are common. Not everything is measured in money. Often it's direct exchange of foods, each getting what they need. Once they have traded most of their produce, our family uses some of the earned cacao beans to purchase a few things they desire. The father goes to the stall where they sell salt, harvested from the lake beds. He hands over a couple of cacao beans for a bag of coarse salt, which they'll use in cooking the next week. The boy tugs on his mother's skirt, pulling her toward a vendor, grilling something on a comal. The delicious smell wafts over. It's freshly made tlaquili cakes, or maybe tetlas, triangle corn cakes stuffed with beans. The boy's mouth waters, the mother smiles, and decides to treat the family to a hot snack. She gives a cacao bean or two to the vendor, and in return gets a few fresh tamales, steaming and wrapped in corn husks. These tamales are filled with spiced beans and bits of pumpkin seed paste, a savory treat. Tamales are commonly sold here. They're portable and filling, ideal for a quick meal in the market. The family sits on a low wall to eat the tamales. They peel back the corn husks and bite into the soft, steaming corn dough. It has a comforting, smooth texture and a rich flavor from the filling. As they enjoy this treat, they watch the life of the market around them. There's so much to see. Nearby, 2 elderly women are selling atoll drinks out of large clay jars, one of chocolate flavor and one of fermented sour maize flavor. A few warriors, recognizable by their distinct haircuts and cloaks, are drinking gourdfuls of that atoll to refresh themselves. Over there is a stall with fruit, mamey sapote with its orange flesh, small red cherries, Capulan cherries, custard apples, cherimoya, and other seasonal fruits from far-flung orchards. The mother thinks of buying some fruit for the children, but fruit can be pricey if not locally grown. She opts instead for a bundle of fresh herbs, maybe episode or sage, for flavoring their beans at home, which a country girl is selling for cheap. The father browses the tools section and admires some finely made obsidian knives and wooden farm implements. He notices also the stalls of luxury goods he can't afford, the sections where they sell brilliant feathers, jade ornaments, and cotton-embroidered clothing for the nobility. The market is neatly organized by type of goods, all the food vendors in one area, textile sellers in another, clay potters in another, etc. The Spanish chroniclers will remark on the good order and control of Tlatelolco market, even though it serves tens of thousands of people on market days. The sounds of the market rise and fall in a constant hum. You can hear merchants calling out their wares. Hot tamales, get your hot tamales here. One shouts, likely in Nahuatl, drawing customers with the same sing-song lilt that street vendors still use today. Another is advertising fresh fish. Indeed, merchants bring fish from the lake, and even dried fish from the distant coasts. One can find small salted lake fish or crayfish here, or cured strips of ocean fish that have been traded in. The smell of fish, both fresh and dried, mingles oddly with the sweetness of flowers and the pungency of raw meat in the butcher section. Yes, they do have a butcher area. You can see a stand where game meat is laid out, rabbits, deer haunches, perhaps even some dog meat or iguana being butchered. For the squeamish, it might be jarring to see, but for the Aztecs, these are normal protein sources. They hunted deer and rabbits in the surrounding forests, and wild peccaries or boar-like animals occasionally, though big game is rarer near the city. There are even skinned rodents like gophers or tooge, prairie dogs being sold. Their meat would go into stews for added protein. The boy stares wide-eyed at a stall displaying what looks like piles of insects. Those are maguey worms, fat white larvae that live in agave plants, and Eskimos' ant larvae, delicacies to be fried or mixed into dishes. Some other kids are pestering that insect seller, who shoos them away from sampling the goods for free. Our family doesn't buy meat today. It's expensive for commoners, and they get their protein mostly from beans, occasional fish, or the rare extra egg from their turkeys. But just seeing the variety in the market is enriching. The mother reminds the boy that they have what they need at home and shouldn't spend all their hard-earned cacao beans. They have 1 or 2 beans left after the salt, herbs, and tamale purchases, and she tucks them away in a little pouch. Those might be saved for another day, perhaps to get some cocoa beans to make a chocolate drink on a festival, or to be combined with more later to buy a small cotton blanket. Cacao beans are literally money in this world, and ironically too valuable to simply eat casually if you're not wealthy. The boy understands. He's content with his tamale and the treat of watching the market bustle. Now the sun is slanting toward late afternoon. It's time to head home. They've traded away their produce and gotten what they need. The little family pushes off their canoe again, joining the traffic of boats leaving the market docks. They navigate through the canals, the water now golden in the lowering sunlight. Herons stand in the shallows, perhaps eyeing the fish scraps tossed from the market. The city's silhouette grows larger as they approach their neighborhood. They pass under a wooden footbridge where a group of women are washing clothes in the canal, chatting to each other calmly as they work, the wet fabric slapping against flat stones. Life everywhere around them is full of these small sounds and routines. Nothing hurried, just a consistent flow of daily tasks from morning to evening. Back at home, the family unloads their purchases. The toddler wakes up from her nap and smiles when she sees her mother. The mother hands the little one a small bite of leftover tamale, and the toddler gums it happily. For young children, Aztec mothers often soften food by pre-chewing it or giving them easily digestible gruels. An infant might be nursed for a long time, perhaps up to 2 or 3 years old, but after 6 months or so, they introduce corn gruel or atoll to supplement. By toddler age, the child is eating bits of tortillas, mashed beans, and soft fruits. There is no cow's milk or formula, no cows at all in this land, so the transition from mother's milk to solid food is done with things like diluted atoll and maize gruels. The mother has a memory of her own grandmother teaching her to roast amaranth seeds and grind them with honey to make little cakes for the children. These are nutritious and easy for small stomachs. She resolves to get some amaranth grain next time. Amaranth is a grain that, like maize, was a staple and even used ritually in making edible figurines of the gods. It's also very healthy and was often popped and mixed with honey or Maggi syrup to make a treat similar to modern alegria, a kind of sweet bar. Maybe she will make some for her kids soon if she can. Now the mother and father start preparing the main meal of the day. It's late afternoon. The sun is lower but still light outside. Typically, Aztec commoners have their second and larger meal in the late afternoon or early evening after the day's work. Today they have some beans that have been soaking since morning. The mother pours the water off and puts the beans in a clay pot with fresh water. She sets it on the 3-stone hearth and feeds the fire some dry wood. Soon the pot is boiling. These are likely black beans or pinto-type beans. Several varieties exist, and they will need to boil for a while to become soft. She adds no salt yet. Adding salt early can toughen the beans. Instead, she tosses in a few episode leaves, a herb that helps flavor beans and reduce indigestion. As the beans simmer, she starts another pot with squash. She peels and chops some of the squash pumpkin they harvested. Pumpkin and other squashes are very common in their diet. She also has some tomatoes from their garden and maybe a fresh chili pepper or two. She slices the chili thinly, careful to not touch her eyes after. Into the pot goes the squash, tomato, chili, some wild greens the boy collected, like quillies, which taste a bit like spinach. This will cook into a kind of stew or casserole of vegetables. She might enrich it with a dollop of pumpkin seed paste, if available. Ground pumpkin seeds add protein and thickness, an early form of what we now call pipian sauce. She covers the pot and lets it all simmer together, stirring occasionally with a wooden spoon. Meanwhile, the father is outside tending a small earthen oven, or grill. He has managed to snare a few small fish from the canal, little lake fish about the size of his hand, likely a species of whitefish that was common and said to be particularly sweet. He wraps the fish in maize leaves and places them on hot coals to grill, or simply skewers them on a stick to roast over the flame. The smell of roasting fish, rich and oily, mingles with the sweet aroma of boiling squash from inside. The children eagerly watch the fish cooking, mouths watering. Meat or fish is not an everyday item for them, but today the father got lucky with the net. These fish, sprinkled with salt and a bit of chili powder, will be a fine addition to their dinner. As the food cooks, the mother quickly grinds some more nixtamalized corn on the metate. Yes, more tortillas need to be made. The ones from morning are mostly gone, or were used for lunch. In Aztec households, fresh tortillas are usually made for each meal. They do not keep long. They get stale and hard by next day, and it's almost unthinkable to serve a main meal without tlaxcali, the Nahuatl word for tortillas, meaning cornbread. So the grindstone is employed again, though in smaller quantity than at dawn. The daughter helps again with patting them out, and soon a new stack of warm tortillas is ready, wrapped in a cloth to stay soft. Now the family gathers to eat their second meal. They sit on woven reed mats, petates, on the floor, around the serving dishes. The grandmother of the family, we hadn't mentioned her yet, but let's say the father's elderly mother lives with them as well. She emerges from the shade where she had been spinning cotton thread during the afternoon. She is toothless and her hair white, but her eyes are bright. She settles down quietly, and the daughter makes sure to hand her a serving first. In Aztec culture, elders are respected and cared for. The grandmother is given a bowl of the rich bean stew, which by now has finished cooking to a thick consistency with soft beans. The mother has mashed some of the beans and squash together, making it easier for the grandmother to chew or sip. For the rest of the family, the stew is served in bowls with all the chunky bits, creamy beans, tender squash, bits of tomato and greens, all in a flavorful broth tinted orange-green by the vegetables. They season their portions with a bit of the coarse salt and ground chili, and maybe squeeze a few drops of lime juice if they have a local source of small limes. The Aztecs did have a type of citrus fruit introduced earlier from trade, though not common, but they did use sour fruits like the juice of certain cactus fruits, or the sour zacatl fruit, which is even the origin of the word zacatl, meaning sour, used for fruits. The roasted fish are placed on a small platter. Each person takes some with their fingers, flaking the tender white flesh. There are not many, so it's mostly for flavor. Perhaps one small fish for the father, one for the mother and grandmother to share, and one split between the kids. But that's okay. They each get a taste. They wrap pieces of fish and spoonfuls of stew into tortillas, essentially making little tacos, and happily eat. They don't use forks or spoons. The tortilla is their utensil, and occasionally they lift the bowl to their lips to drink the broth. This is normal table manners here. They chew quietly. Conversation is minimal during the meal itself. If someone speaks, it's in a soft voice, perhaps to ask if anyone wants more chili or to compliment the mother's stew. The grandmother might reminisce in a low voice, "This squash is as sweet as the ones from my girlhood home," and the mother smiles. They all know the effort that went into this food, and they savor it respectfully. For the children, this meal is filling. The toddler sits on her mother's lap, gnawing a bit of tortilla soaked in broth, a safe, mushy bit for her to enjoy. The 8-year-old boy devours his portion and eagerly asks for another half tortilla to scoop up the last of his beans. The mother reminds him kindly not to overfill his stomach too quickly. Moderation is a value they hold, even when food is plentiful. Indeed, Aztec teachings often encouraged moderation and frugality in eating. They frowned upon gluttony. Eating too much or too greedily was considered unwise. One should leave the table satisfied, but not incapacitated. The boy nods and slows down, sipping some water in between bites. As they finish up, the father does something interesting. He takes a tiny bit of his fish and a morsel of tortilla and sets them aside near the home altar. In one corner of the one-room house, there is a little shrine with symbols of the gods, perhaps a small clay figurine of Chicomecoatla, the maize goddess, or of Tlaloc, the rain god, and some dried flowers. He places the food offering there and murmurs a short prayer, thanking the gods for this meal. Many families make such small offerings, akin to saying grace, but in a tangible way by giving the first or last bite to the divine. It's believed that failing to give thanks could invite misfortune or displeasure from the unseen powers that provide the rain and growth. The family has heard the old stories of famine and knows not to take food for granted. In fact, the grandmother lived through a terrible famine in her youth. As twilight settles in, painting the sky orange and purple, she begins telling the children in a gentle, wavering voice about the famine of the one rabbit year, Sitochtli. That was around the year 1454, some 16 years before this imagined 1470 day. She describes how, when she was a little girl, a great drought struck the land for several years. The maize withered in the fields, lakes dried up, people were starving. That year, her own family had nothing to eat. They resorted to chewing on wild grasses and weeds, and catching whatever they could, even the most unusual foods like rats, snakes, or cactus roots were eaten to survive. She speaks slowly, and the others listen in solemn silence, having heard the tale before, but always humbled by it. The little boy looks at his empty bowl, imagining what it would be like to have no beans, no corn at all. The grandmother continues, "Things became so desperate that some parents in regions hardest hit had to sell their children or themselves into slavery in far-off lands just to obtain a few meager corn tortillas to keep from dying. And many people from this valley migrated towards the Gulf Coast to the Huaxtec lands, trading their freedom for food." The boy shivers. It sounds like a nightmare. The father adds quietly that the famine was what drove the Aztec Empire to expand aggressively. Their leaders vowed never to suffer such starvation again, and they started conquering lands to secure more fertile fields and tribute of grain. The grandmother nods. She remembers how, after the famine ended, thanks to renewed rains and a particularly abundant harvest a couple years later, the elders declared that they must always honor the maize and never waste even a kernel, for maize is truly the sustenance of the people and a gift of the gods. She still recalls how, as a girl, she was scolded if she dropped a tortilla on the ground. It was said that such carelessness could offend the corn goddess and bring hunger, To this day, she diligently picks up every grain that falls while grinding, treating it like a precious pearl. Hearing this, the mother silently reaches over and squeezes the grandmother's hand, understanding the old pain behind those memories. The shadows lengthen and night is approaching. After the meal, the family tidies up. In an Aztec home, cleanup is simple. Leftover food, if any, is stored in a cool corner in covered pots. But tonight, not much is left beyond perhaps a scoop of beans that will become tomorrow's breakfast filling. The cooking pots, still warm, will stay by the hearth. The fire is banked to low embers, keeping the room gently warm and ready for the next morning's ignition. The daughter sweeps the floor with a bunch of grass, humming a little lullaby to her baby sister. The sounds of the neighborhood settle down as well. From a nearby house, one can hear a mother scolding her child lightly to finish their atoll before bed. From another, there's laughter, perhaps someone telling a funny story by firelight. And in the distance, from the direction of the temples, a conch shell horn blows, marking some hour of the night, or calling priests to a minor ceremony. Tonight is a normal night, not a festival, not a fast, but the Aztec calendar is full of religious observances, so let's imagine that tomorrow is the start of a festival period. As the family winds down, they recall that in a few days the city will celebrate the feast of Huitozosli, which in our terms happens in late spring, around April or May. This is the great vigil festival, in honor of the corn deity and the rain gods, thanking them for the new planting. During that festival, they know there will be ritual fasting for some and ritual feasting for others. For commoners like them, it might mean abstaining from salt and chili for a day or two, as a form of piety. They've done it before, eating their corn tortillas utterly plain, with no seasoning, as an offering of self-denial to the gods. It makes the food taste so bland, but that's the point. It's a sacrifice of comfort. The boy grimaces, remembering the last time he had to eat unsalted atoll. It was hard to swallow, but he also remembers the reward. After the fasting came a joyful feast day, when everyone broke their fast together, enjoying tamales and rich sauces again, and giving thanks that the cycle of sowing and harvesting continues. The grandmother is nodding off. The toddler is already asleep in her arms, having been gently rocked. The father steps outside into the small courtyard to gaze at the stars and have a puff of tobacco from a pipe. Tobacco is commonly used in the evenings for relaxation. Even in ritual contexts, it's offered to the gods at feasts. The mother joins him, and together they look up at the clear sky. There is a nearly full moon, and in its light they can see the outline of the distant mountains. They reflect quietly on the day. Perhaps they speak softly about the future. Maybe next season they will try growing some amaranth on a corner of the Chinampa for variety. Or they talk about how the market prices are changing because a new tribute shipment of corn came in from a conquered province. Indeed, at the height of the empire, huge quantities of food are brought into the capital from all over: maize, beans, chilies, fruits, salt, cacao, tribute from subject towns. This system ensures the city is well fed, and also creates surpluses stored in state granaries. The father mentions he heard that in the emperor's granaries, there are enormous bins holding thousands of measures of dried maize, enough to feed the whole city for years if need be. The mother raises her eyebrows, not sure if that's just a boast or reality. Either way, they both are grateful that right now, they personally have enough food in their home. Their earthen storage jars are about half full of dried corn and beans for the coming weeks, and strings of dried chilies and smoke-cured squash slices hang from the rafters. The mother has also salted away a little fish and meat, thin strips of rabbit meat that she smoked over a fire a month ago after a successful hunt, wrapped carefully in corn husks to preserve them. These preparations make her feel secure. If tomorrow some disaster struck or the weather turned bad, they would manage for a while on what they have. They turn in for the night, spreading mats on the floor to sleep. The city around them dims, only the occasional dog bark or distant flute from a temple ceremony breaks the silence. Our family sleeps under woven blankets, their bellies content but not overfull, just comfortable and warm. The little boy, drifting into dreams, imagines the taste of the sweet tamales he hopes to eat at the upcoming festival. He's also thinking of the stories his grandmother told of the gods and food. Earlier in the evening, perhaps around the hearth, she was telling the children a beloved legend, the story of how Quetzalcoatl brought corn to humanity. She recounted how the world once had no maize, and the corn was hidden inside a mountain guarded by other beings. The ant showed Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, where the corn was. Quetzalcoatl transformed into a tiny black ant himself and carried a single grain of corn out from the mountain, then gave it to the people. From that grain came all the corn we have now. As she told it, her voice was soft and reverent, whereupon from it the gods ate, and later they put it into our mouths, she quoted, emphasizing that maize was a divine gift to mortal mouths. The children love this myth. It makes their everyday tortillas feel magical and sacred. In their drowsy state, they perhaps imagine Quetzalcoatl and that little ant working so people could have corn. Now our scene shifts. Let us quietly leave this sleeping family and float upwards in our imagination across the city of Tenochtitlan to peek into other lives and how they eat, all in the same evening. The city is vast, home to perhaps 200,000 people, and not everyone's meal looked like our humble family's dinner. In the distance, torchlights glitter from the imperial palace. Tonight, the great speaker Huitzilopochtli of the Aztecs, who in 1470 would be the newly enthroned Axayacatl since Montezuma I died in 1469, is holding a banquet for some nobles. Let's imagine that scene for contrast, as long as we do so gently. In the palace courtyard, there are rows of torches casting a warm glow on stucco walls painted with bright murals. Dozens of guests, noble lords, high priests, merchants of the prestigious Pochteca Guild, are reclined on fine reed mats decorated with woven designs. They wear embroidered cotton cloaks and gold jewelry that glints in the firelight. Before each guest is a small individual table, more like a stand, holding dish after dish of exquisite foods. Servants, both men and women, move silently through the gathering, bringing fresh plates and refilling cups. The menu here is far more elaborate than anything our common family ever sees. There are large turkeys that have been slow cooked and then covered in a rich sauce made of ground chilies, pumpkin seeds and chocolate, an early form of mali or mole sauce. There are platters of rabbit meat cooked with maize kernels and herbs, bowls of frog legs and axolotl salamanders in a green chili broth. These amphibians from the lake are considered delicacies, and skewers of roasted game birds seasoned with aromatic native herbs. The nobles nibble on tidbits of venison jerky spiced with local peppery sage, and they spoon up a stew made from corn smut fungus, which has a mushroomy flavor. In one corner, a group of visiting dignitaries from the coast enjoy their specially requested food, grilled iguana with a side of cassava brought in from far to please their tastes. To accompany all this, there are countless sauces. The Aztec nobles love complex sauces. Earthenware bowls hold sauces of various colors: red chili tomato sauce, a bright green sauce of ground pumpkin seeds and jalapenos, a yellow sauce made with chiltepin peppers and little crab apples, and even a black spicy sauce thickened with ground local beans. The nobles dab their foods in these, relishing the medley of sweet, fruity, earthy, smoky, and fiery hot flavors available to them. They have access to seasonings, the commoner might never taste, exotic vanilla pods, fragrant cacao used as spice, achiote annatto that gives a nutty flavor and red color, and imported spices from the south. Some sauces are mildly sweetened with maguey honey, syrup from the agave, or with pineapple juice reduction, since actual cane sugar doesn't exist here yet. The result is a sophisticated cuisine fit for royalty. Servants circulate with drinks. Pulque, the sour-sweet fermented maguey sap, is offered in some cups, but interestingly, the higher-class guests politely decline the pulque or only sip sparingly. Pulque is considered the drink of commoners or the elderly. Nobles often avoid it to maintain decorum. Instead, the nobles favor chocolate, frothy cups of cacao mixed with spices. A particularly favored recipe is cacahuatl, literally cacao water, which is a chocolate drink frothed to a foam and flavored with a pinch of chili, some honey, a bit of flower nectar, and vanilla. They serve it in golden cups or beautifully painted gourd bowls. Our great speaker Axayacatl might raise a cup of this chocolate and sip it slowly. The taste is bitter and rich, with a spicy kick and perfumed sweetness from vanilla. It is believed to invigorate and is something of a status symbol. After all, cacao is so valuable that using it as a mere beverage is a luxury of the elite. Some lords also indulge in a special fermented pineapple drink or maize beer, pozzoli, but cautiously. There are strict laws against drunkenness. A commoner can be severely punished, even by a first offense of public intoxication, often by humiliation, like having their house destroyed or their hair shaved off. A noble caught drunk could face execution on the first offense. Only those over 70 years old are more or less exempt from these rules. Elders can drink freely as a sort of earned privilege. But at a noble feast like this, they are careful. They drink for taste and ritual, not to become inebriated. Between courses, entertainers perform softly, perhaps a few musicians playing gentle tunes on clay flutes and drums, and some dancers executing slow, elegant movements. The atmosphere is one of refined celebration, not raucous at all. In fact, some banquets of the nobility begin late. Often after midnight, the party continues. They can last all night with storytelling, recitals of poetry, and gentle smoking of tobacco at the end. It's like an aristocratic salon. If you looked at the faces of the guests, you'd see contentment and a kind of pride, for feasting is not only about enjoyment, but also showing one's wealth and honoring the gods with abundance. Before they began this feast, every guest also dropped a morsel of food on the ground, just like the commoners did, as an offering to Taltakuchli, the earth, acknowledging that even this splendid repast ultimately comes from the soil and the gods. At the climax of the banquet, a special course might be served, something truly exotic, perhaps human flesh. Yes, at the risk of shocking you, cannibalism in ritual context did occur among the Aztec elite, not as an everyday food, but as part of religious ceremonies. If this banquet coincides with a major temple ceremony, they might have sacrificed war captives earlier that day to honor the gods, say during the dedication of a new temple or a major festival like Talakasipe the flaying of men in spring. In those cases, portions of the sacrificial victims, after the heart was offered to the god, were given to the noble warriors and priests. They would cook the flesh in a simple manner, typically boiling it with salt and perhaps some maize, making a sort of sacramental stew called tlacatloli. Importantly, they did not season it with chili or strong spices, as it was considered a sacred food, the food of the gods, and chili was abstained from, almost like a fast, when consuming it. In our imagined noble feast, perhaps a small bowl of such stew is presented to each high-ranking warrior present, honoring them and the gods. They eat it reverently with tortillas. To them, This is not gruesome, but deeply spiritual. They believe by eating the flesh of the sacrifice, they are in communion with the god's sustenance and bravery. It's like a holy rite, one that binds them as brothers and as chosen of the gods. Of course, this is a detail not talked about loudly in daily life, and something totally absent from the commoner's table. But it is a facet of Aztec food culture at the highest echelons. Food could be sacred and symbolic to the point of including human essence. Now, let's leave that noble feast behind. It's splendid, but perhaps too lively for our sleepy narrative. The night wears on. Across the city, things grow quiet. In the calm darkness, only the city watch and the periodic sounds of nighttime rituals are heard. Perhaps on a distant temple, priests are burning copal incense and fasting in preparation for tomorrow's ceremony. They might be abstaining from all food, or just from flavorful food, enduring hunger as a form of devotion. Out in the countryside beyond the lake, farmers sleeping in their village huts might awaken from time to time if they hear animals prowling near their stored crops. A thief or a wild coyote might be about. There is a very real fear of food theft in such times. Aztec law is harsh on thieves. Stealing more than a trivial amount of maize, say more than 20 ears of corn, can be punishable by death. Lesser thefts result in forced restitution. If the thief can't repay, they might be enslaved by the victim to work off the debt. Such is the value placed on stored food. It is life itself, so even at night, some vigilant souls keep an ear out around the granaries. Our commoner family sleeps peacefully through the night. The mother dreams lightly, perhaps of grinding corn, the repetitive daily task echoing in her subconscious. The father in his sleep recalls being on campaign in his younger days. He once went with the Aztec army on a campaign to a neighboring region. In his dream, he's marching again with fellow warriors through the dry mountains. He can almost taste the rations they carried. Tamales wrapped tightly for the journey, and little bags of toasted maize flour mixed with dried beans, pinole that they could stir into water for a quick gruel. The Aztecs had to be clever in war. They would often bring women along as cooks for the army, but in rough campaigns, they relied on portable, pre-made foods like tamales that could be eaten on the move. In fact, legend has it that tamales were first popularized as a military ration to avoid the need to cook cornmeal porridge fresh in the field. Wrapping the masa and filling in a corn husk meant a warrior could carry several days' worth of food that only needed reheating or could even be eaten cold. In the dream, the father tastes a cold, slightly dry tamale and recalls the mix of excitement and fear on those campaigns. Aztec warriors also carried gourds of water and maybe some salt or chili to keep their stamina. Sometimes, he remembers, they went hungry intentionally to steel themselves, or when supply lines were thin. War was a time when the body's relationship to food became strategic. A disciplined warrior would not overeat or drink until victory was at hand. Many times they were promised a grand feast in Tenochtitlan when they returned victorious, and that kept them going through the gnawing hunger of long marches. As dawn nears, a rooster crows again somewhere. The city's quiet is about to break with morning activity. Let us drift away from individual stories now and reflect in a broader sense on the rhythm of food and agriculture in the Aztec world, all in a calm and reflective way. The Aztecs lived according to the cycle of the seasons and the sun. Their calendar was intricately tied to the agricultural year. They had an 18-month solar calendar, each month 20 days, and many of those months corresponded to stages of farming, one for sowing, one for first fruits, one for harvest, etc. For example, in the month of Atzalcoatl, around March, ceremonies were held to petition the rain god Tlaloc for a good sowing season. Then in Huitzilopochtli, April-May, as mentioned, They offered the first maize stalks and flowers to ensure abundant growth. Later, in Tlaxochimaco, around August, they celebrated the offering of flowers and maize, and by Ochbanistli Sept, it was time to celebrate the harvest and clean the granaries for new storage. These festivals all involved specific foods and rituals, offerings of tamales to gods, dances carrying ears of corn, eating special dishes only made in those times. The entire city and countryside would join in communal preparation of food for the feast days, often culminating in large gatherings where everyone eats together. It's a sacred duty and a communal joy, very much like how we have harvest festivals or Thanksgiving, but observed more frequently and with deep religious meaning. Between the big festival feasts, there were also times of scarcity and fasting. During the dry season, roughly winter in central Mexico, fresh foods were fewer. People relied on stored maize, dried beans, and whatever dried fruits or squash they preserved. They made hearty stews and casseroles from dried ingredients, rehydrating dried chili peppers and adding some dried meat or fish if they had it. They salted meat and fish to make it last. For instance, salamanders, ducks, and fish from the lakes could be sun-dried or smoked to be consumed later. There's evidence that the Aztecs even collected the blue-green spirulina algae, called tecuitlot, from the lake surface, dried it into cakes, and ate that as a protein source, a truly unique food that the Spaniards noted was sold in markets as cakes of mud, but highly nutritious. In lean times, they fell back on extremely resilient crops like chia seeds and amaranth grain, which could be stored for years and are packed with nutrients. These were often part of the tribute from subject regions, ensuring there was a buffer stock in the capital for famine relief. Not unlike modern governments storing grain reserves, the Aztecs did the same on a grand scale. In their warehouses, officials kept track of incoming tribute every 80 days or so, since tribute was often paid quarterly. Canoe convoys and porters would arrive with loads of maize, beans, chili peppers, salt, and delicacies like cacao and honey. For example, the province of X might owe 8,000 baskets of maize, 2,000 baskets of beans, 1,000 sacks of chili peppers, and 80 jars of honey every payment period. This is a hypothetical, but based on records from the Codex Mendoza, which list tribute items by province. These goods went into massive storehouses. Some were used to feed the king's household and the many workers in the city, like the soldiers, priests, etc., and some were saved for emergencies. One chronicler claims that one royal granary in Tenochtitlan held over 2,000 chiquipilli of corn, a chiquipilli being about 8,000 kernels, by one interpretation, which was said to be a 20-year supply for the city. Whether that's exaggeration or not, it illustrates that storage and preservation were critical concerns. Corn was typically stored as whole dried kernels in large bins or baskets, kept dry and safe from pests, sometimes sealed with mud. Beans likewise were dried thoroughly and stored. Squashes could be cured, hardened, and kept for a few months, or cut into strips and sun-dried. Chili peppers were routinely dried. Wreaths of red chilies hung in kitchens, both as decoration and pantry. Fish and meats were salted or smoked. They even made a sort of jerky from deer meat or dried strips of turkey. Without refrigeration, drying and salting were the ways to not waste any precious protein. Thanks to these methods, the Aztecs managed to support a huge urban population. But they were always aware that a bad run of luck, a drought, a flood, and early frost could bring disaster. Their history had taught them this lesson the hard way. So they incorporated that anxiety into their religious life. There were regular prayers and offerings to ensure the sun would keep rising, the rains would come on time, and the maize would grow tall. In their view, the balance of the world depended on humans feeding the gods, so that the gods in turn would feed humans. Feeding the gods meant offerings of what was most precious, often blood and lives in the case of the highest deities like the sun, Huitzilopochtli, and rain gods. They offered the heart and blood of sacrificial victims so that the sun would have energy to move in the sky and the rains would fall. It was a grand cosmic reciprocity, and in exchange, when the harvest was good, they made sure to celebrate it with grand feasts, sharing that abundance among the community and offering the first and best portions back to the divine. Let's picture one of those communal feasts, perhaps at harvest time. In a village outside Tenochtitlan, the corn has ripened and been picked. The village leader and priest declare a feast day. Everyone contributes some of their harvest, a basket of corn here, some squashes there, a few chilies, maybe one family that raised turkeys offers one for slaughter. Early in the morning of the feast day, a group of women assemble in the central courtyard to cook together. They have huge clay pots bubbling with stews. One might be a pozole, a special maize and meat stew. Pozole in Aztec times was different from today's hominy stew, but similar in concept. Large kernels of corn cooked until they burst, combined with meat, maybe that turkey or some game, and seasoned with herbs. There's an old account that sometimes human meat from sacrifices was cooked in a celebratory pozole-like stew for warriors, but in most village feasts, it would be turkey or pig-like tepesquintal rodents if available. The women also prepare mountains of tamales, some flavored with ground pumpkin seeds, some with red chili sauce, some sweet ones with honey and fruits. Tamales are labor-intensive, so doing it as a group is almost necessary. You can imagine the scene, women laughing and gossiping softly as they grind corn, mix dough, spread it on soaked corn husks, and add fillings, then fold and set them in large clay steamers. Little children run around playing, snatching a raw piece of dough now and then, until their mothers scold them gently. By afternoon, the whole village gathers. They sit in family groups under any available shade, maybe under a large ahuetti tree or a makeshift canopy of reeds. The priest conducts a brief thanks ceremony, burning incense and perhaps sacrificing a small bird, or offering tamales to the fire for the god's portion. After that, it's time to eat. The food is served out to everyone, steaming tamales unwrapped and passed around, bowls of hearty stew, roasted corn ears, fresh tortillas. People eat with contentment. It might be one of the few times of the year they eat to their full satisfaction, even a bit beyond. Children giggle as they try a rare treat, perhaps a honey-sweet tamale with ground cherries or plums inside, something reserved for feasts. Old men sigh with pleasure, chewing slowly on tender meat from the stew. Even the usually stern warriors allow themselves seconds or thirds of the rich food. These communal feasts strengthen the social bonds. Everyone contributed, and now everyone partakes. There's likely music afterward, drums and flutes playing upbeat tunes, and some dancing by both old and young. As dusk falls, people are still nibbling on tamales and telling stories by fire pits. Such nights leave warm memories. They are the good times that sustain them through any later hardships. Not all in the empire have it equal, though. At the edges of the empire, there are subject villages that must send much of their harvest as tribute, leaving them with less for themselves. In those places, people might quietly resent that while they go with basic meals, the capital enjoys a dazzling abundance. There is an underlying tension. Food can also be a tool of power. The Aztec state at times used forced hunger as punishment. For example, if a community rebelled, they might be cut off from food supplies or their fields destroyed. On a smaller scale, a city official could punish a petty criminal by destroying their house and stores, effectively starving them as a lesson. People feared hunger, and for good reason. Now, as we continue to float through our imagined Aztec world, let's consider the variety of unique foods their land offered. Some of these foods have been forgotten or are rarely eaten in modern times, which adds a touch of melancholy wonder when we think of them. On a tranquil night like this, one could wander into the marshes by the lake and see fireflies blinking over the water. Under the surface, there are those curious creatures, axolotl salamanders. The Aztecs caught axolotls easily and considered them a delicacy, comparable to fish. They would wrap them in maggie leaves and cook them or use them in stews. Have you ever heard of a dish made of salamander? In Aztec times, that was real. And what about insects? We mentioned grasshoppers and ant larvae, but also in the lake, they gathered the eggs of water boatman insects, ahuatle, which were seasonal and called Mexican caviar later by the Spanish. These tiny eggs would be toasted and eaten or made into a sort of pancake. Imagine a crisp little cake of millions of insect eggs, crunchy, nutty, and totally normal if you grew up with it. There were also maguey worms, which live in the agave plant. These, when fat and ready, were plucked out, fried, and enjoyed, still a delicacy in Mexico today in some regions, often eaten with a sprinkle of salt and a squeeze of lime, tasting somewhat like buttery shrimp. The diversity of protein sources was broad, from the sky, pigeons, ducks, turkeys, from the earth, deer, rabbits, peccary, even the occasional mountain puma or wildcat, though that would be rare, and from water, fish, frogs, shrimp, salamanders, insects, even snails and shellfish were eaten if available, though we're far inland. Trade could bring dried shrimp or certain preserved shellfish from the coasts. Nothing was wasted. The earth provided, and they found nourishment in places others might overlook. We should also mention honey. The Aztecs did not have the European honeybee, but they had native stingless bees, melipona bees, that produced a honey they used for sweetening treats and drinks. And they tapped the maguey plant, agave, for its sap, collecting the sweet agua meal, honey water, which if fermented becomes pulque, but if boiled down becomes a syrup, somewhat like molasses that can sweeten things. So, while sugar cane was unknown, they had some natural sweets. Fruits too provided sweetness. Ripe zapote fruit tastes like brown sugar, and pumpkin, mamey is like creamy sweet potato with berry notes. Tunas, prickly pears, are like watermelon candy. They would mix fruits with cornmeal to make atole de frutas, or mix fruit pulps into tamale dough for variety. Let's return to the sensory environment as another day dawns. The cycle repeats. Morning fires lit, corn grinding, the smell of smoke curling from every rooftop. That smell of wood smoke and corn tortillas is the perfume of the Aztec morning. Perhaps as you wander mentally through a neighborhood at breakfast time, you catch another scent, chili smoke. Some women toast dried chilies on the comal to grind into chili powder for the day's cooking. The hot capsicum vapor tickles noses and might cause a few folks to cough or eyes to water, a familiar, homely irritation that they don't mind. It's the sign of a good cook preparing the spice for the meals. Combined with that is maybe the smell of toasting maize. Sometimes they pop some maize or heat kernels to make a quick snack, and that smells a bit like popcorn, which they also knew how to make. Archaeologists have found that certain corn varieties in Mesoamerica were used for popcorn. So yes, once in a while kids might eat popped corn as a treat, marveling at how the hard kernels burst into soft white flowers. Maybe a mother is making some pinolo for her husband to take on a journey. She dry roasts maize kernels until almost charred, then grinds them with cocoa and spices. The resulting powder can be mixed with water later to form an energy drink or porridge. The roasting gives off a deep coffee-like aroma. As midday heat rises, you'd find shade and perhaps indulge in a cool drink that a vendor in the market sells. One popular refreshment is agua de chile, a cool water infused simply with a bit of chili and salt. Sounds strange, but think of it like a savory Gatorade, replenishing salts, and giving a tiny kick. Another might be aguas frescas of various types, hibiscus flower brew, Jamaica, or a tamaringo drink from tamarind pods, or an orange-colored drink from mamey fruit pulp. They had many such concoctions, though some of these specific ones could have been developed post-conquest with new fruits. Still, with native fruits they likely made juice drinks. Imagine a clay cup of fresh guava juice mixed with water, fragrant and sweet, or fermented corn sweet water for a slight buzz. On festival days, another special drink appears, octali pulske, mixed with different flavors. For example, they sometimes added red colorings and fruits to make a pulske cocktail, or added herbs for medicinal effect. On one feast of the earth goddess, they would mix ground corns in pulske to symbolize fertility. Pulske is viscous and off-white, not appealing by modern beer standards, but it was nourishing and considered sacred to some extent. They had a god of pulske and drunkenness, Omatoktali, leader of the 400 rabbit gods of drink. The elders gather around a giant jar of pulske and dip their gourd cups in, chuckling and telling tales from their youth, enjoying the privilege of being allowed as much as they want. One old man might sing a little ditty after a few gourds, while younger folks giggle because he's a bit tipsy, but he has the right. He's over 70. It's fine. Let's not forget chocolate in the daily life. While commoners seldom drink cacao daily, warriors and merchants often do when they can, because it's a stamina booster. A long-distance trader pulske, preparing for a trip, might pack some pressed cacao paste to dissolve in water along the road. Warriors before battle might be given a round of chocolate beverages by their commanders to invigorate them, and certainly the noble class might start their day with a morning chocolate drink spiced with a bit of chili, like how we have coffee. Montezuma II, the last emperor, famously was said to drink dozens of cups of chocolate a day, served by maidens in golden cups to maintain his vigor. That's possibly exaggeration, but he clearly enjoyed a lot of cacao. Back in our commoner perspective, days go by with certain monotony, but also comfort. We should take a moment to feel the textures and small pleasures of their eating experience. Picture a man returning from the fields, dusty and tired. He washes his hands and face with a bowl of water by the door, then sits down to a bowl of pozole. He lifts a wooden spoon. Yes, they did have spoons, typically made of wood or gourds for soupier dishes, and scoops some of the broth. He picks out a big corn kernel. It's soft, nixtamalized maize, boiled till it's plumped and floured. He bites it, and it's tender but toothsome, with the mild hominy flavor. He adds a squeeze of bitter orange, naranjia, to the soup and a pinch of chili powder. The zing wakes up his mouth. Then he takes a bite of a crisp toasted tortilla. Sometimes they intentionally let tortillas dry and toast them into chips, tlaxcoltopochli. This crunchy texture is delightful against the soup. In his pozole, he might also have some meat shreds. He chews slowly, savoring the rare richness. The woman of the house might be eating a simple taco, a fresh, warm tortilla, sprinkled with salt and wrapped around a handful of mixiotes, pit barbecued meat, or just around some avocado slices and herbs. The softness of the tortilla contrasts with the slight crunch of the herb and the creaminess of avocado. She closes her eyes for a second, enjoying that. The little kids are often given atoli, or gruel, which is bland. To them a treat is maybe if mom put a dash of cocoa or fruit in it. One child might have a tiny toasted corn cake, sweetened with maguey syrup. Biting it gives a satisfying crunch and release of sweetness. A teenager munches on a roasted pumpkin seed snack, cracking the salted shell with their teeth to get the nutty kernel, much like one might with sunflower seeds today. We've mentioned how foods varied by class. Let's illustrate a direct contrast. Consider the morning meal of a noble versus a commoner on the same day. At dawn in the palace, a young noble wakes and is served by a slave or servant. On a polished stone patio, he sits on fine cushions and is offered a bowl of fresh fruit, rare plums, and maybe some berries from the highlands. He sips a lukewarm chocolate drink, lightly frothed because early morning they sometimes took it as a light meal. Then a plate of white tortillas is brought. These are made from the choicest maize, very pure and fine textured. Indeed, Sahagun noted the white tortillas for nobility were so refined they were like shells, maybe thin and delicate. With them comes a little dish of insect egg pat mixed with tomatoes, a very luxurious spread. The noble lad spreads that on his tortilla and eats in refined bites. A cooked quail egg or two might accompany. It's a breakfast of variety and luxury. Meanwhile, at a commoner's hut, a farmer of the same age eats his late morning meal in the field. He has just one or two coarse yellow tortillas, maybe yesterday's leftovers, fire warmed, and he scoops up some beans and wild greens with them. He drinks water. That's it, plain but filling. Social rules also guided consumption. Certain foods, like amaranth cakes shaped as gods, were eaten only in ritual contexts. One famous example, during the festival of Huitzilopochtli, the Aztecs made a statue of the god from amaranth dough, mixed with maguey syrup and the blood of sacrifices. At the ceremony's end, people broke the statue and ate it together, symbolically communing with their deity. The Spanish were struck by this and later compared it to Christian Eucharist, though of course very different context. But to the Aztecs, eating a representation of the god was deeply devout, not at all taken lightly or for taste's pleasure. Feasting had its laws too. There were sumptuary laws. Commoners couldn't wear cotton, for instance, and similarly, they probably weren't supposed to indulge in things like fine cacao or excessive meat. If a low-born person was found hosting a lavish banquet with luxury items beyond their station, eyebrows would raise. However, communal religious feasts somewhat leveled these distinctions for a time. On those occasions, nobles provided food for the community often, so a poor person might enjoy turkey stew, courtesy of a noble's generosity, at a temple feast. At the great feast of Sukumopili, the new fire every 52 years, everyone who survived to see it got to feast because it marked resetting of the calendar and a renewal of world in enormous celebration. And even prisoners were sometimes freed, or at least fed on such days. What about the bad times? We touched on famine, but there were also shorter crises. A flood could wipe out chinampas, or locusts might descend and eat the crops. People held collective breaths during those events and prayed hard. They had rituals to ward off pests, and they stored water in cisterns for drought. Some years, no matter what, there was scarcity, and people went hungry. The artwork in codices shows thin, hollow-eyed figures in famine years, or parents carrying emaciated children in search of relief. It's a stark reminder that the abundance of Tenochtitlan was built on a knife's edge of natural forces. Now consider emotional moments with food. Imagine an Aztec warrior who has been captured by an enemy, perhaps the Tlaxcalans, and is awaiting sacrifice. The night before his intended death, he is given a final meal by his captors, as per custom, likely a simple one, maybe just a toll and tamales. He sits in a hut, tied, sipping the warm atoll slowly, knowing it's his last meal. What goes through his mind? Possibly he tries to savor it, to take strength from it, because he believes his spirit will need strength to face the gods. Or perhaps he has no appetite from fear. Accounts say some captives bravely feasted, even sang, resolving to die honorably. Others likely wept into their food. That's one scene of eating while grieving one's own fate. Another, a family who has lost someone to illness, say a child to fever, holds a small funeral. After the burial, neighbors traditionally bring food for the mourning family, similar to many cultures. So at dusk, neighbors drop by with bowls of hot stew and fresh tamales. The grieving mother and father have no heart to cook, but they have other children who need to eat, and communal care ensures they will not starve in sorrow. They sit quietly, force themselves to take a few bites of the warm soup. Its flavor is comforting, but muted by their grief. They likely offer a bit of the food on a home altar for the spirit of their lost child, so he can have something to eat in the afterlife. In Aztec belief, the dead might need provisions on their journey, especially those going to the dangerous underworld, Mictlan. Thus, they bury or burn some offerings with the body, a small bag of corn kernels, a water gourd, maybe a favorite food item of the deceased. It's a final act of love, sending them off with sustenance. The family then continues to eat plain, simple food in the days of mourning, perhaps refraining from salt and chili as a self-imposed austerity, as if saying that in sorrow they shouldn't enjoy flavors. Over time, as life moves on, the normal taste returns, and with it, slowly, joy in food can reappear, reminding them that they are still alive and must carry on. Food also served as a language of respect and communication. If a revered guest visited your home, you absolutely had to present food, the best you could afford. Offering salt and corn was a gesture of hospitality as serious as any pledge. Sharing chocolate with someone signified that you held them in high esteem, or that the occasion was very special because you were literally consuming wealth together. There's an account that when Montezuma met Cortez, among the many gifts he sent initially were chocolate, fruit, and food to signal goodwill, though that turned out ironically. Within the society, if a commoner went to petition a noble for something, they might bring some food tribute, maybe a basket of tortillas or fruits, to appease him and sweeten the request. Similarly, when marriages were arranged, the groom's family would bring food gifts to the bride's family, and vice versa as part of the negotiations, turkeys, cacao, fine tamales, indicating we are willing and able to care for your daughter. And during the actual wedding ceremony, there was a beautiful custom. The bride and groom shared a single bowl of atoll, feeding each other a few sips and bites of tamale, symbolizing the start of their life of shared meals and mutual sustenance. It's a tender moment where food is the language of union and promises. As night falls on another day in our journey, we may hear in the distance the drums of a ceremony at the Templo Mayor. Perhaps it's the night of Tlaquisipihualistli, the flaying festival in early spring, honoring Xipetotec, the god of renewal. It's a gruesome festival by description. War captives are sacrificed, and then a select few honorable warriors wear the flayed skins, symbolizing renewal of life, like a seed losing its husk. After such intense rites, the next day might involve a communal feast, where the bodies of those sacrifices are partaken by the victors, only those permitted, which we touched on. But beyond that, all the participants feast on more normal food as well, celebrating victory and the gods' blessings. Feasting and fighting were intertwined. The promise of ritual cannibalism aside, even normal battle often ended with a feast. Aztec warriors carried traveling ovens, in a sense that they would occupy a town and then feast on that town's provisions after winning, sort of like an enforced hospitality. If a battle was won, huge victory feasts were thrown back home, with captives paraded and honored before sacrifice, and tables laden with food for the populace to share in the glory. Now, an interesting subtlety. While the Aztecs did not have old-world animals like cows or goats, they did have one unusual imported food late in the empire: poison. Yes, they got a taste for the idea that food could kill as well as nourish, especially to deal with enemies. Some Aztec records mention attempting to poison rival leaders using herbs or sending them gifts of food laced with something. Not exactly a daily life thing, but a footnote that in their world as ours, food could carry treachery, but generally, Aztecs valued honesty in food, adulterating marketplace food, like selling rotten goods as fresh, was punishable. As we near the close of this journey, let's contemplate what happened in the aftermath of the Aztec Golden Age. The year 1521 arrives, the Spanish siege of Tenochtitlan. For 93 days, the city is cut off. Food runs out. People eat anything. The leather of their sandals, grass, even, reportedly, human corpses out of absolute desperation. Some chroniclers allege that. It's horrific. When the city finally falls, the once vibrant markets are empty, and the survivors are skeletal. It's a tragic end to a civilization built on careful food management. In the years that follow, the conquerors introduce new foods: wheat bread, sugar, beef, pork, cheese, milk. The diet of the land shifts drastically. Many old foods are deemed pagan or inferior. The cultivation of amaranth was suppressed because of its use in non-Christian rituals, and it nearly went extinct, meaning those delicious amaranth cakes and rituals stopped for centuries. Chocolate got taken to Europe and sweetened, losing its sacred context and becoming a global commodity. Maize remained the native staple, but the Spaniards tried to push wheat in their tastes. Over generations, some Aztec dishes vanished, who continued making a huatli insect egg patties when the lakes were drained and taste changed. How many recipes died out because the ingredients, like certain wild herbs or local animals, were lost or discouraged? The old gods to whom they offered food were gone as well, replaced by new saints and the Christian God. But interestingly, certain traditions persisted disguised. Leaving a little food on the ground might now be framed as feeding the wandering souls, or simply as superstition. But it continued. The Day of the Dead became a Christian-influenced version of honoring ancestors, but people still prepare special foods: sugar skulls, pan de muerto, much as they did with amaranth figures and ritual loaves for Micolhuitli in Aztec times. And what of today? The script of daily cooking sounds surprisingly familiar if you wander a Mexican village at dawn. You still hear pat, pat, pat of tortillas, though often now aided by metal presses or mills to grind corn. The smells of chili and corn still define the cuisine. Mexicans still call maize our flesh, our bones, in a poetic sense, acknowledging, like the Aztecs did, that corn is at the core of their being. Many foods from Aztec times are national dishes: tamales, atole, pozole, barbacoa. Pit-roasted meats were done with turkey or iguana, now often beef or pork, but techniques similar. Chili sauces, moles are famous, blending chili with chocolate and seeds just as Aztec nobles did. The tortilla remains king, even though bread is eaten too. No one imagines Mexico without the tortilla. Beans and squash are still staples, as are tomatoes, avocados, and chilies, all gifts from the Aztec and their neighbors to the world. Some rarer items like chapulines, grasshoppers, are now trendy in some places, a revival of ancient protein. Others, like human flesh stew, thankfully did not continue. But interestingly, the symbolic communal eating in a sacred context has its echo in the Catholic Eucharist, which the Spanish encouraged as replacement, eating the body and blood of Christ in bread and wine form instead of that of war captives. The Aztecs, in a twist of fate, likely saw parallels, and some converted understanding it through that lens. There is a bit of soft grief when we realize so much knowledge and flavor was lost. We cannot truly recreate an Aztec meal exactly as it was. The environment is different. Some native species are gone or endangered, and the context is lost. However, we can still feel the echo of those meals. Every time one savors a fresh corn tortilla cooked on a comal over fire, one can close their eyes and almost sense the presence of those countless generations before, for whom that was life. The taste of nixtamal corn has a distinctive, slightly mineral, wholesome flavor that connects you to an unbroken chain from ancient times. The heat of a raw chili biting your tongue can make you appreciate why the Aztecs saw chilies as a daily joy and also an object of sacrifice to let go during fasting. The aroma of chocolate bubbling with chili might transport you to a noble banquet hall for a moment, the way it might have smelled when Montezuma's servants frothed hot cacao in golden cups. Now, as we end our journey, imagine once more you are in that calm, starlit night in the Valley of Mexico, perhaps in the year 1480. The lake is placid, reflecting 1,000,000 stars. In a simple house, a family sleeps content after a good meal. In a palace, nobles murmur late into the night over their chocolate and tobacco. In a distant village, drums of a harvest dance have finally fallen silent, and everyone, drunk on polka and happiness, has gone to bed with full stomachs. The empire as a whole breathes in the darkness, dreaming of maize fields and the promise of tomorrow's sunrise. Food was not just calories for them, it was life, culture, religion, struggle, and comfort all at once. Each meal, from the poorest slave's scrap of tortilla to the emperor's banquet, fit into a grand tapestry of meaning. And so, when we think, what did people actually eat in the Aztec Empire, we find not a simple menu, but a whole world. A world where everyday actions, a woman grinding corn, a child learning to wrap a tamale, a farmer planting seeds, a warrior accepting a ceremonial cup of chocolate, were tied to the cosmos and community. As you drift to sleep, carry with you an image, a hearth in a small Aztec home, glowing softly, a clay pot steaming with fragrant stew, a mother humming a lullaby as she pats out the last tortillas of the night. The stars outside are shining as brightly as they did in 1470. In the morning, the sun will return, and the people will wake and continue their eternal dance with Mother Maize, Father Sun, Sister Water, and Brother Chili. In this gentle, continuous cycle, there is a profound peace. Thank you for coming on this journey. May the echoes of wood smoke and ancient kitchens lull you into restful sleep, and perhaps in dreams, you'll find yourself sitting on a reed mat under a sapphire sky, sharing warm tortillas and beans with friends from another time, quietly understanding each other without words, bound by the simple, universal comfort of a good meal. Good night.